Now, what I want to talk about and show you is how to take, I usually buy hand planes at the tool auction down in North Kingston. Unfortunately, we haven't had an auction since maybe before COVID. I'm not sure. It's been, I don't know if they're going to have any more there, but I know there's one up in Massachusetts, up in Attleboro, they have one. I don't, and it's usually every 6 months they have one there. So what I do is I go and I want to, when I first started, I wanted to buy some hand planes. So I went to Woodcraft and I looked at the hand planes they had and I looked at the prices. And I thought, I can't do this. My wife would shoot me. I'd have to go home and tell her half price I paid for it. I couldn't tell her the full price. Well, somebody turned me on to the tool auction. So I went there and I found a couple tools. I looked online, I read some books. I tried to figure out how to repair one. And so one turned into two, two turned into 40, 40 turned into 50. I've probably refurbished over 200 and some planes. Anybody in the room that I get a hand plane for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that'll give you an idea. I like the idea of having something in my hands that I can use. And that's the key, if you can use it, because it takes practice. But it's from 1920. It's from 1890. You know, some of these hand planes are very old and they're still usable today if you take care of them and put them into a shape that's usable. So I'll start with, this is a number 2. Now this one, pretty shiny, clean. I've fixed this up. This is a number 2, which I just bought recently. It's in pretty good shape, but it doesn't look anywhere near as nice as this. And the hand planes, when I first started was looking at them for Stanley in particular, my thought was, oh, I want to have one of every one of them. Until I realized they had a 1, they had a 2, they had a 3, 3.5, 3 1/4, they had a 4, 4.5. That kept going. They have so many, I can't even count. But I do have a book. 2 guys who work for Stanley. I'm not sure where they were working for him at, but they wrote this book and it has all Stanley tools in it from about 1965 prior. Nothing newer than that, because Stanley no longer makes products here in the United States anymore. They import it from foreign countries and have it made there. But this book will give you every hand plane that's back there. I was looking at some of them that Stanley you could find in this book. And it'll give you the condition that and the price for the condition that it's in. And they usually have 3 different ratings on condition and price. But this is probably now, I think this is about 30 years old, this book. They made a small hand version. I've gone to tool auctions and watched guys pull these things out and look at them and then make a bid on a hand plane. If you want to get into getting a hand plane and for value, you're wasting your time. Not worth doing. If you want to have a hand plane that you can hang up in your shop that you like to look at, I do that. I like that. In fact, this one right here they used to make barrels. But they also used to make wheels. Ford Motor Company helped Stanley become successful by buying this tool from them when they were building cars that had wooden wheels. Not wooden wheels. The spokes in the wheels were wooden. There's a lot of those around. Most of these planes, there's quite a few around. So what I'm going to start doing is I want to take one apart and just talk a little bit about it. This little handle is called the tote. And this is a knob. Or it looks like one. So that's a knob. I'm going to take it apart. When you want to restore one, you want to do what is called electrolysis. In order to do electrolysis, you got to take completely apart. Because you want to do it piece by piece. Take the cap lever off. By the way, this, see if I have one. Yeah. Same company. See the difference? The curl in this one and this one straight. In this book, it will tell you when you have a hand plane and it'll show you all these features and tell you when it was made. So you can determine the age of your hand plane by the newest item that's on it. And what they don't tell you though is the body of the hand plane, if it has Bailey on it, Bailey was a separate company from Stanley. Stanley bought Bailey. Bailey was a foundry that poured the base and made hand planes. Stanley was a rule, I think it's called rule and level or something like that when they first started. Hand planes was just one of the many things, but they weren't very good at hand planes. They bought Bailey and they took all the people that worked for Bailey and brought them into Stanley. And then they started making hand planes. And something like this would be probably somewhere around 1950. And this would be prior to 1950, if it looks like this. Also, there's no name on this one. And the earlier Stanleys, they didn't engrave their name on them. So this is another part. I'm gonna take this right here. They recommend you take it apart like this and leave the screw there. It is a little difficult to get the screw in. I'm not sure why, but every time I see videos on the internet, I see them doing that. They take it apart that way. So that's what I do. This is the blade, and this is a chip breaker. That helps push the chips out of the way. The next part I'm taking out is called, I don't know why, it's called the frog. Maybe because it looks like a frog when you're drinking, I don't know. Pardon me? Oh, it could be. I want to apologize. I don't have very good hearing. I've had a lot of problems from my experience in the military with my ears, and my left ear I have no hearing at all, and my right ear I have about 40%. So I have hearing aids on, and this hearing aid will pick up something over there, but it transferred it to this one because I can hear out of here. And I'm walking with my wife, and she says, "Oh, you hear the birds?" And I'm looking up there because I can hear from this side, but the bird's really over there. That's the way it is. This is called the frog. This is a adjuster screw. And this is a camper that you can do left or right on it. Now we're getting down to take this last part off. And then I'll explain electrolysis. I usually take, when I buy one, I take it just like this. I take it completely apart. And I have a grinder. That's normally what I would use. You could use a Dremel if you wanted. And I have a wheel, and I put one of those grinding wheels on it. They're wire wheel rather, not grinding. And I put a pair of gloves on because they hurt like hell if you get too close to it. And then I take it and I clean it. It really will take all the rust off this particular part. That's one way of doing it. Then I take a pair of long nose pliers and this is brass, and it'll shine the brass up like brand new on that wheel. And that's what I do. And I take every one of these parts, long nose pair of pliers, washers, screws, everything goes through the grinder to get all the old rust off. You can't very well use a grinder on this. You can't get in here to get the rust out if there's rust there. And on here, very difficult to clean this up with the grinder. You just can't get in there. So that's where electrolysis comes in. If there's rust on it and you want to get rid of it, you need a pail, something like that. You need some sort of metal or iron, and I use re-rod because it's very inexpensive, and I can impress my grandchildren by bending it. Actually, I got to use a vise to do that. And lately I can't even do it with a vise. But anyway, this is what I use. I take 2 blocks of wood and I'm going to put them underneath this because I don't want it resting on the plastic. The electrolysis will work through wood. It won't work through plastic. So I'm going to put this in here, 2 blocks of wood underneath it, although they're not right now, but pretend they are. So I'll put 2 blocks of wood under there. And then I'll take the body of the plane, and I want to do this first. I'll take another block of wood and put it under the block of wood and put it in here. And then I'll take a pail of water. Doesn't matter how much water, it's just a guess. I mean, they're on the internet, they do say a certain amount of water for a certain amount of washing soda. It's got to be soda. It cannot be washing, it can't be soap. I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. It can't be detergent that wash clothes with. You can wash clothes with this, but this is soda. You need the sodium for the reaction with electricity. So I normally fill this up high enough that when I put this in there on a piece of wood, the water covers it. You need a battery charger. You need a power source of power, a plug somewhere. I made a set like this. I made this because this is what I'm going to connect to it. But I don't want this in the water, and I don't want it to get anywhere near where the rust is. I want a good, clean connection. So negative to positive. I'm going to take the rust off of and add it to negative to plus. So I'm going to put the black on here, hook it up here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this, only it's going to go on here. So I'm going to take some soda. I usually take about 3 spoonfuls, mix it in there real good. And it takes a good 10 or 15 minutes to get it dissolved in there and stirring it around. And I'm actually doing that. I take this back out and then I use a spoon, a wooden spoon, to stir it real good. So I keep looking at it. It's clear. Keep looking, I can see it in the bottom, and then eventually it all dissipates into the water. And then once you have that set up, you put your item that you want to clean. It could be this, it could be this. I do them all separately. Do this. I take the screw out of it.
You don't want multiple items in?
No, it takes too long. If you do one item, the current flows better from the negative to the positive. I hook it up. I make sure everything's hooked together. I make sure this is hooked on there. I'm not going to hook both of them on. I'm just going to show you. And I just clamp it here out of the water. This is in the water. And the other one that I put on here, this is going to get rust on it. I can't help it, but I keep it above the water. So what I did was I did the same thing here. I made one so I don't have to ruin my clips on my battery charger. So now I got all that together. You want to plug make sure everything's hooked up and then plug it in. And it takes a while. You won't see anything in the beginning. I usually let this stuff, I call it cooking. And that's because I've seen that on the internet, and that's what the other guys called it. So I let mine cook. The first time I did it, I cooked it for about 4 hours. And it took a little bit of rust off, but that's not long enough. Over time, I found that 2 full days worked perfectly. After 2 full days, all the rust that's on here will be gone, and it'll be on here. You'll be attracted to the re-rod. You'll actually see it. After maybe 4 hours, you'll see this gray stuff and green and brown bubbles on the water. And that's the reaction that the electricity is causing as it flows through the water. And it's pulling the rust with it. And it produces a little bit of hydrogen. And that's not a bad thing. It won't hurt you. We already have that in nature anyway. But it's clearing all the rust that's on here. And it works extremely well. I've never, after 2 days, I've never found a piece yet that had any rust left on it. It literally takes it all out.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many amps do you run that?
This one, I think most battery chargers are the same, 4 amp and 6 amp, but I'm not sure of that. But this one is 12 volt and 6 volt. Let's say it that way, rather than amps. I usually run on 12. You could do 6. It just takes a little longer. Now you want to thrill, put it on 12, plug it in, and come over here and grab that with your hand. And you know what'll happen? Nothing. It won't shock you. Will it let you know you got a hold of it? You certainly will. Have you? It's about half of what a cow would get if he walked into an electronic fence. That's about the electric that's running through here. So it's not a life-threatening thing. You don't want to do that. You don't want to reach your hand in there and grab it, but yes, sir.
You say 2 days to remove the rust. Is that regardless of how much rust is on it?
Yeah, it'll take a,
How much rust the thing, it'll be.
yep. And probably 2 days is an overkill, but I've gotten so used to the 2 day thing, I do it with everything. Even if there's a little bit of rust, it's 2 days. So how long does it take to recondition one of these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 14 days. Because once they're done through the electrolysis, you take it off, you still have some work to do. Doesn't have any rust on it, but it's got a gray film on it that you got to clean off. And it comes off, and you can wipe it off on your fingers. But you can get it off better if you take a scrub brush and just scrub it. Good and wet. Don't be afraid to use the water. And then what I do after that is I take a hair dryer and I get it so hot that it burns my finger if I touch it. All I'm trying to do is get all the water out of it. So I do that to all the parts. And now there's literally no, it might have pitting, but it will have no rust.
You have to remove, whatever rust went to the rebar, and clean the rebar.
I usually throw the rebar away. I will use a rebar about once a year. I throw it away. So I've done maybe not anymore because I used to do a lot of it, but I would do maybe 10 hand planes with the same rebar. And then after a while, I'd throw it away. You can do this in your workshop. It's not going to affect you. It's not going to put any gas in the air. You could do it. I usually, though, I take mine in my garage. And because I want it out of the way where nobody's going to walk by or kick it or bump into it. And I put it in my garage and I plug it in and leave it out there. That's normally how I do it. And then I take it out, I take it to the sink, clean it up the best I can, take it to the shop, use a heater on it, heat gun, and dry it out. But then I don't stop. I don't want to wait, because if you put it aside and you wait 2 or 3 weeks, guess what happens?
Rust.
It'll rust again. Guarantee it'll happen. So I usually, within a day after I'm done with electrolysis, I'll start cleaning it and sharpening it. And I use that wire wheel, as I said before, on parts I didn't put in there. I don't need to, because these little parts here, they don't rust that bad. There's not normally a lot of rust on. They're a little difficult sometimes to get separated. Sometimes you can't get the head off. And I put it in the vise and just crank it and it'll come out. Take it and clean it up and then put some oil on it. Was it
WD-40.
WD-40? I don't particularly like WD-40 because it doesn't last long. After about 3 or 4 months, it's gone. I like camellia oil. It's a Japanese product, sold at Woodcraft, but you can get it on the internet. 4-in-1 oil also, I like that. It lasts quite a while. And I'll oil everything. Everything gets oiled when I'm done shining it. And then I put it back together. And in the little holes where the screws go in here, I put oil in there. And I want it, when I put the screw in, I want it to ooze out. That's okay. Because 6 years from now, when I take it apart, there'll be no rust in there. Because the oil is down in there. You could, I guess. Yeah, you could use that if you wanted to. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And now I also do the handles. Rosewood come out of Argentina. Unfortunately, it's no longer available. Argentina will not sell it on the open market. Stanley had a contract with them and they got it up through the 1960s. And I'm not sure when Argentina decided, well, they don't like us anyway, us being the United States. But they stopped selling rosewood on the world market completely. So rosewood was how Stanley put all their handles. And it was really nice looking. You know, you could take this and sand it and then put a finish on it. It'll have a beautiful, it'll look really nice. Actually, you can see them right here. Almost all these are rosewood that I refinished. And except for this one. This was a Stanley hand plane that I bought. I don't remember exactly what the date was. And actually, I didn't buy it. Somebody gave me a gift of a hand plane because they knew I liked hand planes and had plastic handles on it. And it did not have, the adjuster was not brass. It was a metal. I don't even remember what kind it was, but that's this plane right here. So I took it all apart, flattened the bottom, sharpened it, put rosewood handles on it. I liked it because it's so darn heavy. The heavier a hand plane is, the easier it is to use. So this is kind of a mixture. It's not original. Most of these parts are from other hand planes, but it's turned out to be the one I like the best. What do I use it for? I replaced every door in my house after I bought the house. And that's maybe 12 to 15 doors. And I was so good, they wouldn't close right. So I had to shave a little bit off the edge. That's mainly what I used this for when I first started. So my doors would close. Since then, I don't have a lot of use for hand planes other than inlay, because I like to do inlay, like Rick was talking about. And I went to that class that he went to, and what was his name? Yeah, Harry Gackett. Derek Hack. Remember, we went up for the weekend up there.
Yeah.
And scratch stock and inlay. Now, this is just a small portion of the leg I think it's 26 inches, and I made it longer. And I cut it off, and I just thought I'd bring it in and show you. When you make a project, in my opinion, and it looks nice, that's great. But when you add a little bit of inlay to it, or a little bit of scratch stock to it, it adds to the appearance of it, makes it look a little bit better. That's just my opinion. But that's a table leg. And I would use my plane when I cut in here, either with a scratch stock, or sometimes I'll use a table saw and just cut a like 1/8 inch curve and put a piece of ebony or some piece of something inlay in there, then take my hand plane and smooth it. You could also sand it, but why create all that sawdust? Let me talk a little bit about some of these hand planes. This one's a Miller Falls. I probably have never used this one, but I cleaned it up. I like the name Miller Falls. I went to the tool auction and saw that, and it was so bad I couldn't really read the name on it. Now look what it looks like. Look at the bottom. Now I do take a piece of glass. I bought I think it's 36 inches long, almost as long as this table, maybe not that long. And then I had sandpaper from my sander that's drum sander. Yeah, thank you. And I bought 80 grit sandpaper to use it on my sander, and it didn't work out as well as I thought it would. But I come to find out that 80 grit sandpaper is perfect for flattening the bottom of one of these, but just starting. I use 80 grit back and forth, back and forth. And now when I do this in the future, I'll think $75, I could have this done, huh? $75. When I go from 80 to 120 to 180 to 220 to 400 and finally 1,000, because I want to shine on it. And that's how this one and all these were done. And I usually redo the handles. A couple of them, including this one, had a broken handle. And believe it or not, it's cracked right through here. Really hard to see because it went together well. But Type Bond 3 is, it's a really good glue. It's going to hold. Even though this was broke, it's not going to come apart. So today, the glues are so much better than they were years ago, in my opinion. And the other thing is numbers. And whether it's a hand plane, whether it's a jack plane, whether it's a bench plane, it all depends on who made it. Unfortunately, there's no set standard. Generally there is, but specifically there's not. So here's an example. This is a Miller Falls. This is a Stanley. This one, they're just so identical, okay? And this one is a Bailey, and I want to talk a little bit about it. Now, this is a number 5, I believe. Yeah, number 5. Okay. This is a Miller Falls number 6. Exact same size. That's just the way the companies did it. For whatever reason, they had their own numbers. But Stanley kind of set the standard for almost all of them. Scrub plane, bench plane, block plane. This is being a block plane. This would be considered a block plane. So when they get a little bigger, you might want to call them, depending on your own opinion, a bench plane. I look at it this way. A block plane I can use with one hand. A bench plane normally takes two hands. So when you're using two hands, it could be called a bench plane. But if it's a Black & Decker, it's a junkie plane. I don't think they made very good planes. They did attempt it, but they didn't do a very good job. Unfortunately now, believe it or not, Black & Decker owns everybody. I don't care except the Lowe's tools. Lowe's is, I feel Cobalt. The Cobalt,
No, Cobalt, yeah.
Yeah.
Richard is, it's Home Depot.
whether DeWalt, whether it's Milwaukee, they're all owned by Black & Decker. And they're all made overseas. They don't make them anything. They make a few parts in the States. Most of it is all done overseas today. Any questions?
While you're talking about electrolysis, the leather cap that you were saying is the older one up
Yeah.
there, looks like it's made of carbon steel. And these over here look like they might be tin coated. So I was wondering if they are, if you know that, and if it's okay to put those shinier ones in the electrolysis.
Good question. No, don't put that in electrolysis.
Okay.
Clean that up with a grinder instead. You're right. This one definitely could go in electrolysis and it will clean it up very nicely. Cap level. And it has a little, there's two positions to it. Up and closed. And if you are using a hand plane and you're finding you gotta push on that to get it down, that's too much pressure. You gotta relieve that. This screw right here, back it off a little bit, so it just snaps down. Just like that. That easy. Because the pressure, you can see this little lever on here. When it's up, it's flat. Can you see that? And then when I go down, you can see a gap there. At least I can see it. There's a gap there, which puts the pressure on the blade. And you got to have the right pressure, because when you go to adjust it, if you have too much pressure, you can't get the adjuster to work right. That's why a lot of people get frustrated with hand plates. So you got to loosen it up a little bit and do it again. I'm going to do some planing here just to show you what I'm talking about. There is a position on all hand planes. I don't care what company, what brand, there's a flat spot. The flat spot occurs when you're going forward, trying to see whether it's working, going forward, and then you say, oh, I want to back up. And you turn it. Nothing happens the first time you turn it, because that's the flat spot. You're just getting ready to get back to the threads to reverse it. So when you're using a hand plane, what I normally do, when I would recommend, I'm going to get the blade so it's not showing at all. I say that.
You want me to leave on that bench as a ballast?
Yeah. Where's my other one? I like. Here it is. I don't want to connect at all. Then I want to slowly turn it. No connection, no connection, no connection. That's okay. When you use the hand plane, you got to have patience and you got to take your time. And I'm rotating a little bit each time. Just trying to find a sweet spot where it's going to start cutting. There it is. This whole thing is vibrating.
He's also got a knot in the middle of the
Yeah,
board,
it's
so
not the best board to demonstrate on, but you get a nice thin cut. And once you do that, then keep going until you get a cut that goes from here all the way to there all at once. Then you know your board is going to be level. I'm not going to do it. And the other thing I usually do is I like to display them and I like to have them standing up right way. Most people will own them. If the blade is out, you want to lay it on its side so you don't touch the blade to whatever its surface. But I back them out. I might have a few hand planes in my shop. 70, 80, I don't know, a few. I got carried away, to say the least. Anyway, I always back the blade out whenever I put them up because I got them all on display. And I made a case so I could display some of them. And I got them up on the rafters of my shop and on one of the walls. And any other questions? Oh,
Do you ever use emery cloth
yeah, you could do that.
on getting rid of the rust and
Yeah.
if it's a light
And
rust?
in fact, I just talked to a guy who told me he uses Clorox and water.
Hmm.
And I've never heard of that before. I've heard of vinegar and water. I've not heard of Clorox and water. And then also a lot of the Home Depot places, they sell rust removers. And that'll work too. The only downside is you got to work the heck up. You really got to scrub it. You got to work it. Where I think this is easier because I plug it in and walk away from it. And when I'm done 2 days later, all the rust is gone. I'm not sure that can be said when you're using a rust remover because there's an awful lot of handwork being done on that. Now, I still do a lot of handwork on it to clean it up because I shine it, you know, as I mentioned about going through the sandpaper. Any other questions?
This one, I see spray paint there, so maybe you're gonna get to Japanning.
Oh, yeah,
Does the paint or Japanning come off in the electrolysis?
yes. And I actually, when I use the grinding wheel, because I try and grind as much of this body as I can. But I obviously can't reach it all. And the Japanning is still in there. And a very quick story. Years ago, I decided I'm going to do an original job. I'm going to put Japanning back on this. So I went on the internet. I looked up Japanning. Took quite a while to find a person who had a video on how to do Japanning. So I watched it, must have been 10 times. I had ordered all the materials on the internet. And I started thinking, is this worth it? Let's see, I got $80 already involved in this. Just to put the Japanning back on. Okay, well, let's continue. And by the time I was done, I had about a $200 investment just to make Japanning, including I had to get a little toaster oven because they recommend once you put the Japanning on here, you put it in an oven and you bake it. Well, my wife wouldn't hear of that. So it wasn't going in the oven. Pardon me?
What is Japanning?
It's something they used back in 1800s. It's linseed oil, it's iron filings, it's paint. By paint back then, it was lacquer. And I'm not sure that there's some other ingredients I bought, and you mix it together and you got to heat it, and it's flammable. Not a good idea. I went out in my backyard when I did it, and my wife wouldn't let me go anywhere near the house when I was trying this. But Japanning gives a very hard coat, and I have nothing here except for this that has Japanning on it because I haven't cleaned this one up yet. And when I do it, I remove the Japanning. And I'm glad you asked. And this is what I use. Now, I'm not looking to sell anything I make or refinish. And quite a few people here, I've cleaned up planes for you. No charge. I don't care. I like doing it. And I like to see somebody hang on to something that was made in 1830 or 1920 or 1910. So I take this after it's been done and after I shine it all up, I take tape and I'll tape I've done long enough so I know where the Japanning goes. So I'll take tape and I'll take this. I'll take a blade, a box cutter, and cut so it goes right around here. And the top gets painted. No, the top does not get painted. I cut around the edge. Yeah, so there's no Japan, and that just has paint on it. It has about, all of them the same, about 5 coats. And I like using this because it crinkles. and it looks like Japan. Rust-Oleum hammered. It actually, when you spray it on anything, it like bubbles up a little bit and then it hardens. So the bubbles break, but it still left the impression of the bubble. And that's what Japanning kind of looked like. This might, let me see, is this the original? No, I redid that one too. How about that for a handful?
72.
Yep. And there's not many of them around. This one I redid. And again, I'm not in it for any value. I just like having them. In fact, I saw a picture when they were building the White House. And the picture showed 4 guys eating lunch. But in the background, there were hand planes. And there was one of these there. And I looked at it and I said, I want one of those. I enlarged it on the internet. I got as big as I can. I said, what the hell is that? And I saw that. I didn't know what it was. So first one I saw, I couldn't afford it. The guy wanted too much money for it. The second one I saw, I started thinking, maybe I can afford it. I don't remember what I paid for this, but probably around $120 when I bought this.
eBay, those go for over 300.
Yeah, really. And a number 2, what's the number 2 go for on eBay?
That's the one. Number one goes for-
Yeah, number 1. These will go for about 300 or 400. The number 1, I don't have one. I had the chance to buy one. I think you might have been at the tool auction with me, and I think it went for $1,200. You know, it blew me away. I couldn't pay $1,200 for it, and you can't use it, and it's only about that big.
Paperweight. Smokey, this one that you were just showing, the 72 or whatever, but what is it used for?
78.
Not that one, the one that you showed before.
This one,
That one.
Yeah.
It looks like it's.
it's here, right here. That's how you would use it. And the blade is not out. The blade would come down, and depending on how thick, if you wanted to put a flat spot on here,
Okay.
a
So,
lot
yeah,
of tables, they would have increments of curves around it. And that's kind of what they would use it for.
you could make the camphor different sizes depending upon how deep
Yeah.
you set the blade.
Actually, the more you use it, it'll keep digging, it'll go down. And this was a Stanley. And I looked in the book for it, and this is a very early, it's like 1890, this one. Any other questions? I hope I didn't bore you. Let me just, we're almost done.
Looky over there.
When you did this presentation a couple of years ago, you talked a lot more about flattening the plant.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because to me, that was the most valuable thing I learned.
Well, it's time consuming. I use, like I said, I have a piece of glass. It's about maybe 3 feet long. I'm not sure now what it was, but it's very thick. It's maybe a 1/2 inch to 3/4. I got it in Coventry glass. And then I take that and I put sandpaper over top of it. I start with like an 80 grit. I clamp it down on this end. I have it designed so it fits perfectly on my bench at home. Clamp 2 clamps on this end, 2 clamps on this one, on the sandpaper. So it won't move. And then I start. And it would take, I used to count the strokes. And I'd get up to around 3,000.
Don't you cross hatch it or something? on the bottom?
That's when you get towards the end, you want to make sure it's flat. Take a magic marker. I'll just use this one. I take a magic marker and put lines on here. Now, this is only towards the end, because if you do it when you first start, you'll get frustrated. Because after about 2,000 of these back and forth, and the line's still there, that gets very frustrating. But the idea is get thicker, stronger sandpaper. So you cut more of it off. Once you get it with its flat looking from the rough sandpaper, it's real quick to go to the thinner paper. And I usually go through I have rolls of it. I bought, it's adhesive backed rolls of sandpaper. And I put it back, I take that 80 grit off, and then I start with 100, then I go 120. And it takes quite a while. from start to finish with electrolysis to finished product, easily 2 weeks. Just one hand plate. But the getting it flat on the bottom, now they have a micrometer you can put on here and it'll tell you where it's flat or not. I have one of those. And it takes a little battery. And the battery died not too long ago and I don't do this as much anymore. And so I don't use it, but if you do it by hand, you can get it flat, no doubt about it. And it'll be beautiful if you shine it high enough, like 1,000 grit at the very end. When you're down to using 1,000 grit, now you want to use your magic marker more. And you'll be surprised, it takes it off really quick. It makes, once it's all gone, I would assume it's flat. Now you can measure it, you can put your level or rule or whatever you want on it. They're pretty darn flat. Yes, sir.
So there's an explanation on the internet. I don't believe it. I don't subscribe to it. I'm curious what your opinion is. Because I actually service grind biplanes. But it's claimed that these old cast iron molds, that if you flatten it without tension on it, and then you actually put the iron in tension plane, then actually changes the flat. Curious if you do that.
Yeah, I what you're talking about, I've certainly heard. And I'll give you my opinion on it. It's bullshit. It's so minor, you can't even see it. And the wood doesn't care.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I've watched a couple of videos where guys talked about, in fact, one guy said that he wouldn't do anything unless it was always completely assembled because he wanted to keep it solid. I don't agree with that. It's so too heavy. You're fighting with it. It's a pain in the butt. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm searching back into my high school fund, maybe next time for my brain. Why you can't scale up and put more than one piece in the same,
Oh, you can. It just takes longer.
but why would it take longer? Could you not use a higher concentration of chemicals? Or stronger electricity?
I don't know. I'm not sure the answer, but you could probably go a little higher on electricity if you wanted to. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't try it. I'm just telling you though, I'm just telling you what I do. You know, there's a lot of other people out there on the internet have different ideas and they're probably very good. I just gotten used to doing it this way. I feel comfortable doing it that way. And I know, in my opinion, I get a good product when I'm done.
Well, that's good enough. I guys, if you're something that chemical electrolysis that.
And I would say another thing in reference to that, let's say you put 3 or 4 pieces in there. Now you got to have 2 wires for every one of them. You know, you're gonna have all these wires around there.
Yeah.
And you can't let them touch each other because it won't work. I would just do one at a time. You know, no hurry anyway, so.
I just have to comment that now 2 of you have indicated that buying begets buying. And you start with buying 1 tool, you become infatuated with it, you get 2 or 3, next thing you know, you have 80 of them. And so with my bad eyesight, this is looking like a Kardashian. Your wife has a Kardashian.
Do I ever lie? Only to my wife. And only when I tell her what I paid for something. Yeah, I don't want to tell her what I really paid for certain things. And you know what? She probably does the same thing.
I was just thinking myself.
Tell her what you did to your wife. You know what you can do? Shake it like this when you turn it on.
Oh, I did that to her, yeah. My wife got so mad at me.
Oh,
She said, "What are you doing?" Well, maybe the 4th or 5th time I was doing this. I'm in my shop and I'm hooking all this stuff up. And I'm telling her, I said, well, when I plug this in, there's going to be a lot of electricity, a little bit of a fib, a lot of electricity running through there. So you got to really be careful. And I went like this, intentionally hit it. And she's come running over and grabbing. Boy, was she pissed when she found out I was like, I'll never do that again. Yes, sir.
So, does anybody here, or do you know about, do you have been to this place called the Elliott Plate Museum?
No,
Look it up on the web. This old guy, just looked it up now, I've been there. It's only open appointment on Sundays. This guy bought the old fire station. He used to go to this Spicer auctions and all the auctions around here. He has a collection of about 100 plates. And he has them all.
you have his website?
Yeah.
Can you send it to, who can put it on?
This is,
Yeah, broadcast it to everybody.
yeah, DL.
Send us that so we can look at it.
Yes.
That's across the.
It's amazing. what this guy has.
Like field trip.
Yeah. It's really good.
Talk about a field trip. I am going to, from here to Pittsburgh, to Louisville, Kentucky, to Colorado Springs, to Phoenix, Arizona, to LA by car. And I've done that about 10 times. When I was in the military, I traveled a lot by car to get from one location to another. And I got to like it. Now my wife likes it. So we didn't do it for COVID, but now we're back to it this year. We're gonna take that trip again. And I'm visiting people along the way. And I read in a magazine where in Chicago, Illinois, in September, they have hand planes. They have a convention for hand planes. So I'm telling you this, but I'm not telling my wife. We're gonna spend 2 days here, 3 days here, 4 days here, 4 days, we're going this way. And then we're gonna come back through Chicago. And then we'll see what happens on our way back. My plan is to go to that thing.
You might be walking for the rest of the way.
Connecticut is not far from the Rhode Island border. Near Jewett City, most of.
What's the same?
Any other questions?
One more comment. Those who haven't used these hand plants, if I'm playing them a lot all day, it gets real tired. And so if you put just a little over the sole of the plane, a little beeswax.
Yeah, you're right.
It makes life. more
Very good point.
yes.
Yeah, I keep a little block from my car.
You know what else helps? A couple beers.
For setting up the plane, once you have them adjusted, I keep a 3/16 thick piece of maple on the side of my device. I clamp that 3/16 thick piece of maple. And I use that for my lateral adjustment. I take a pass from the left of the blade and on the right. It's the exact same shaving. I get the lateral adjustment for it. I think it's the fastest way when you do your initial setup.
I will tell you that you hear people talk about on the internet particularly, they say, well, you gotta have this, it's gotta be level. It's gotta be within 0.1 of whatever. You can't see it, you'll never know it, and it doesn't really matter when you're doing woodworking. Because wood on itself moves. No matter how flat you get it, eventually it moves. Maybe not in all spots, but somewhere it'll move. Because you'll see, I make furniture. And 10 years later, my grandson's bedroom, I made all the furniture in his room. And on the dresser, on the top of the dresser, there's a crack going right down. And I spent a lot of time on all that furniture, making sure it was put together right and it was glued correctly. And it's right down the glue seam. Those things happen. You know, to say it's got to be perfectly flat, that's pretty hard to do. In woodworking, it's not worth that much effort.
Woodpecker tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Any other questions?
It's a genus.
One last point. If you buy a used tool, even if you buy a new one, somebody made that comment. Always check it. Look how far that's off. This is the one I have not worked on. Doesn't even touch. So that'll take some, you got to make sure you get it level before you start sharpening it. Same thing here. This is really critical. Make sure you take this. I use sandpaper and I'll massage it a little bit. I'll look at it. I've gotten to the ridiculous point where I bought one of those little magnifying that has a light on it. You know, and I'm looking at it. I guess it's okay. But you gotta get this flat. That's really important. If it's not flat, you get chatter. Same thing here. This has got to be flat. Most of them are when they come out of the factory. I've not really had too much of a problem. But the older ones, if somebody dropped it, now you have an issue. Sometimes it's out of line because it was dropped. Not that it was made that way. It just happens when people drop tools. And if you drop one of these, they're heavy. There's going to be an impact. You're going to have a dent in the floor and you might have a chip on your blade, maybe, or you bust. And that's how a lot of the handles get broke. It falls this way. And you find these with the piece missing right there. And that's, you guarantee that was dropped. So if you're buying that particular tool, you better look at it really carefully because it's been traumatic force on it. Now, we're gonna have a test. Okay? No, we're not. I'm done.